Okay, imagine this. You're told by a former U.S. Secret Service agent, right? Someone who's guarded presidents, specialized in reading people, dealt with insane pressure.
Unthinkable pressure, yeah.
And they tell you the biggest mistake you can possibly make at work, the thing holding you back, is being your authentic self.
Wow. Yeah, that flies right in the face of, well, pretty much everything we hear today, doesn't it? Bring your whole self, be vulnerable, all of that.
Exactly. It's completely counterintuitive.
But when the stakes are incredibly high, when a mistake isn't just embarrassing but potentially catastrophic, that whole authentic self philosophy, well, it starts to look a bit different, maybe even dangerous.
Absolutely. So that's what this deep dive is all about. We're going deep into the psychology behind elite performance, drawing on sources who learn these strategies from the best SEALs, Secret Service agents, even presidents.
Right. Communication, reading people, making high-stakes calls under fire.
Our mission today is really to unpack these, frankly, contrarian ideas. We're talking about managing your brain's processing power, the real cost of being too authentic professionally, and how you can actually reclaim genuine proactive control in your life.
And it's not just what the strategies are, like using silence or rejecting endless rumination. It's about why they work, why these shifts in behavior can fundamentally change the trajectory of your life.
Moving you from feeling like things just happen to you.
Exactly. From that passive state to one where you're intentionally directing things, where you feel capable, proactive.
Okay, let's dive in. The absolute foundation, according to this agent's philosophy, is protecting our most critical resource, our cognitive capacity, our brain power. So this first core idea is actually, it sounds simple, but it's profound. It's all about how you manage your mental energy. The expert uses this great metaphor.
The bathtub analogy.
Yeah. Your brain is a bathtub, right?
Yeah.
And your cognitive capacity, your ability to think clearly, make decisions, solve problems, that's the water.
And the key thing is, like any bathtub, it's got a finite size. You can't just keep pouring water in indefinitely.
And the water in this case is
What?
decisions, stress.
It's everything, really. Every little decision you make, all the information you're trying to process, the background stress you carry, even just, constantly replaying minor events or arguments in your head. Keep pouring that stuff in.
And eventually the bathtub overflows.
It overflows. And that overflow isn't just this vague feeling of being busy or stressed. It's actual cognitive overload.
And practically, what does that look like? What happens when the tub overflows?
It means a measurable drop in performance. Seriously.
Yeah.
You get sloppy. You're working memory tanks. You start making poor decisions, especially when things get complex or pressured.
So it's not just feeling bad, it actually makes you less effective.
Totally. Research shows when our cognitive load is maxed out, we get more risk-averse, we become really reactive instead of proactive, and our effective IQ literally drops. So the whole game for high performers is avoiding that state, keeping the water level manageable.
Which really challenges how we think about productivity, right? We tend to admire the busy person, the one juggling a million things, always stressed.
That's the big illusion. Busy does not equal productive. Often, being constantly busy guarantees you'll be mediocre because your brain never has the space, the clear water, to do truly exceptional work.
So good leaders, people operating under real pressure, they're not adding more.
No, it's the opposite. They're ruthless about taking things out of the bathtub. They're constantly asking, what can I eliminate? What can I delegate? What can I just plain ignore?
So they can focus their energy.
Exactly. So they can be truly exceptional at the one or two things that actually matter, the things that really move the needle. The goal is to keep that cognitive load light. So when that crucial moment comes, that high-stakes decision,
Yep.
they have 100% of their brain power available, not just the 30% left over after they've wrestled with traffic and figured out lunch.
And the classic example of this, the one that comes up again and again in the sources, is President Obama.
Oh yeah, the suits. It's the perfect illustration. The source talks about how he owned, what was it, like 30 of the exact same suit, mostly gray or blue.
Which sounds, well, kind of dull, maybe.
To an outsider, maybe, but it was totally strategic. He deliberately eliminated a decision point from his day. What suit? What shirt? What tie matches? Gone.
He weaponized routine.
Precisely. He wanted his bathtub light, as the expert puts it, because his job involved constant, incredibly high-stakes decisions, life and death stuff, global crises. He knew, maybe instinctively, maybe consciously, that wasting mental energy on a tie color meant less capacity later for a complex policy issue.
That's decision fatigue.
That's exactly decision fatigue. The more trivial choices you make early on, the less mental and emotional fuel you have left for the important stuff later. So the rule is always, Take out, don't add. Preserve that capacity. Preserve your emotional stability for when it really counts.
But it's not just external decisions draining the tub. The sources say the internal stuff, the overthinking, is just as bad, maybe worse. Oh, absolutely. Rumination, overanalysis. That's like leaving the taps running full blast. If you spend all your time trying to dissect past traumas, or endlessly analyzing why a colleague slighted you, or trying to psychoanalyze your own behavior,
Like, oh, I'm so disorganized because my mom was disorganized and that's why I can't finish this project.
right, you filled the bathtub just thinking about the problem. You've used up all your cognitive resources on analysis, and there's nothing left for actual action, for execution.
It feels like therapy gone wrong, almost, where understanding becomes an excuse not to act.
And the agent's approach just cuts right through that with this really cold but brilliantly effective question: why does it matter?
Ouch.
Yeah. Why are you burning precious brain power trying to figure out the deep, hidden, complex reason why someone's being difficult or why you hit a setback?
Well, because we think if we understand why, we can fix it or control it, and maybe sometimes you can, but often. The liberating truth, the thing that frees up all that mental energy, is realizing there is no deep reason. There's no complex trauma to unpack, sometimes. And the source puts it bluntly, that person's just an asshole.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Seriously, there's nothing to analyze, nothing to fix. The best cognitive strategy is just to label it, accept it, and move on. Preserve your energy for the things you can actually control and influence.
That shift from endless analysis to just ruthless acceptance and prioritization, that's the first big step to creating the mental space you need.
Okay, let's tackle the really controversial one now. This idea of never being your authentic self at work. I mean, that just sounds wrong to a lot of ears, doesn't it? Especially in creative fields or places that value collaboration. How is that not just a recipe for being fake or, creating a toxic environment?
It's a really important question, and the distinction is crucial. It's not about being phony. The expert makes a clear difference between the authentic self, as it's often understood today, and the professional self.
Okay, so what's the authentic self in this context? It's usually defined as being very centered on me, me, me. It's driven by your immediate internal state, your feelings. What's happening to me right now? How do I feel? I feel angry, so I need to express that anger. What's in this situation for me? It's very self-focused.
Rooted in the immediate feeling, yeah.
Exactly. But the professional world, especially in high-stakes environments like the Secret Service, demands the opposite. It requires your professional self.
Gotcha.
The respectful, confident, highly focused version of you. The version that's obsessed with delivering value, contributing to the team, achieving the mission. The Secret Service doesn't get elite performance by encouraging agents to vent their personal frustrations or bring their unfiltered emotional baggage to the job. That just leads to sloppiness, to distraction. If everyone prioritizes their own feelings, the mission itself is jeopardized.
So it requires emotional detachment, but not emotional absence. Is that fair?
That's a great way to put it. Detachment enables objectivity. And there's this incredibly powerful, chilling story in the source material that illustrates this perfectly. The high-stakes interrogation.
Right, the one involving the child victim.
Yeah. A 3-year-old victim, and the agent needed to get a confession from a 16-year-old perpetrator, fast. Now, imagine the internal state of that agent. She describes feeling intense, authentic outrage, pure fury, a desire to just scream at this kid.
Understandable, completely authentic.
Totally authentic, but totally counterproductive to the mission. If she had brought that authentic, furious New York self into that room, the perpetrator shuts down. The confession doesn't happen. More potential victims remain at risk.
So her goal wasn't self-expression, it was getting the confession.
Exactly. The goal was singular. Get the information needed to prevent further harm. Her personal feelings, however justified, were irrelevant in that moment because expressing them would have sabotaged the mission's success. She had to be professional, non-judgmental, maintain that poker face. She had to be a tool focused on the task, not just a person expressing moral disgust.
Okay, that's an extreme example, but how does it translate to, say, an office environment?
The principle is the same, just lower stakes. If the goal is the success of your team's project, your personal bad mood that morning, or your simmering resentment about a colleague's comment last week, bringing that authentic self into the meeting is often just irrelevant noise. It distracts from the task, it can damage relationships, it hinders progress. The professional self prioritizes the collective goal.
But then the fear is, if I'm suppressing my feelings, if I'm being this detached professional, how do I build real trust? Doesn't that just make me seem cold? Phony.
See, that's where the distinction matters. The professional self isn't phony. It's genuine. It's genuinely committed to the mission, genuinely committed to being competent and respectful. Phony implies you're manipulating or pretending to be something you're not for deceitful reasons. Professional implies you're managing your behavior appropriately for the context, out of respect for the goal and the team.
And trust isn't necessarily built on spilling your guts, is it? It's built on reliability.
It's exactly. Reliability, competence, consistency. Think about it. Who do you trust more? The boss who flies off the handle and reacts emotionally to every piece of news, or the one who remains calm, listens, and responds thoughtfully?
The calm one, obviously. You feel safer bringing them bad news.
Precisely. You build trust by being a neutral slate. When you react with high emotion, yelling, blaming, showing instant frustration, people learn very quickly what not to tell you. They filter the intelligence they bring you because they fear the reaction.
And if leaders aren't getting the full picture, they can't make good decisions.
It's the death knell for any effective team or operation. Being that neutral professional slate allows people to bring you the hard truths, the uncomfortable facts, the bad news, without fear of immediate emotional fallout. You have to prioritize gathering intelligence over expressing your personal feelings in the moment. If you judge first, the information flow stops. Stay measured, stay professional, collect the data, then make the high-quality decision. That's what builds real, lasting trust.
Okay, so we've talked about managing our internal state, our cognitive load, and managing our external presentation, the professional self. Now let's pivot to how we deal with the external world, relationships, and ultimately how we reclaim personal power. The expert mentions that so many people feel stuck, tired of being told they have no control.
Yeah, there's this pervasive narrative that can feel comforting at first, but ultimately leaves you paralyzed. It's the narrative that says, it's not your fault. This bad thing happened to you, and therefore you were defined by that event, that trauma.
Which gives you validation, maybe sympathy.
Exactly. Feels good short term, someone acknowledges your pain. But long term, it's incredibly damaging because it frames you as fundamentally powerless, a product of your past rather than the author of your future.
It traps you. Your identity becomes the injury.
Perfectly put. I am the result of what happened to me.
And that leads to this passive state where you just expect the future to be a continuation of that past suffering. The shift towards empowerment, the philosophy this agent advocates, requires a really profound change in perspective.
It's about accepting, truly accepting. Okay, the past happened. The injury is real. Acknowledging it fully. But then immediately pivoting to the crucial question, okay, now what? Where do we go from here? It shifts the focus from justification and blame to capability and agency.
And making that shift often means confronting some hard truths about our relationships and about trying to change other people. This is where the expert brings in the iceberg idea, right?
The iceberg of identity. It's a powerful visual. When you look at another person, your spouse, your boss, that difficult relative, you only see the very tip of the iceberg. You see their current behavior, maybe their job title, the car they drive, the words they use right now.
Just the surface stuff.
Just a tiny bit above the waterline. But underneath, that's the vast hidden mass, their entire upbringing, their core values, their family history, decades of experiences, past traumas, ingrained beliefs, coping mechanisms, all of it. And that massive underwater part is pretty much fixed. It's solid ice.
But we act like we can change it, don't we? We see the tip and think we can somehow steer the whole iceberg.
That's what the expert calls the arrogance of intervention. We have this naive belief that we can just sort of roll in with our good intentions or our clever arguments or our influence strategies and fundamentally change this person whose core has been formed over 20, 30, 50 years. It's incredibly arrogant, really.
And the agent applied this realism professionally.
Constantly. When dealing with, say, a hardened criminal or a terrorist operative during an interrogation, she knew she wasn't going to magically convert them to her worldview in a few weeks. That iceberg was set. Her focus had to be purely tactical. How do I get the information I need right now? How do I prevent the next attack? You accept the person as the iceberg.
How does that arrogance play out in, like, everyday relationships? The source had that example of the wife trying to change her husband.
Yeah, the woman trying to find the right influence strategy to get her overweight husband to lose weight. He'd clearly told her, I'm happy like this, I don't want to change. But she couldn't accept it.
Because his weight bothered her.
Exactly. And the agent's perspective was bracingly direct. He is the iceberg. This is who he's choosing to be right now.
Yeah.
The real problem wasn't the husband's weight. It was the wife's failure to accept the reality of who he was. She was pouring all her energy into solving the wrong problem. trying to force him to fit her ideal instead of dealing with the actual situation.
Which means accepting the truth and then deciding what she should do.
That's the crux of it. Reclaiming your power starts with radical acceptance, living in truth. Okay, this person is this iceberg. They behave this way. They have these values. They make these choices. Once you truly accept that without hoping for some magical future transformation,
Then the question becomes about you.
yes, the actionable question becomes, okay, given this reality, this fixed iceberg, can I adapt? Can I live with this and stay in this relationship, this job, this situation? Or is the reality of who they are fundamentally a deal breaker for me?
That's the hard part.
That's the really hard part. Because adaptability requires confronting uncomfortable truths. Most people avoid it. They prefer the exhausting, frustrating comfort of hoping the other person will change, rather than facing the painful but ultimately empowering truth of the present moment. They choose the illusion because the reality might force them to make a difficult decision about their own life.
Okay, so building on this idea of living in truth, accepting reality, the philosophy also talks about recognizing people who seem stuck in their problems, who almost seem to resist solutions.
Yes, everything's a problem person.
Right.
We probably all know someone like this. They constantly complain. They seem to lurch from one crisis to another. They demand a lot of your time and sympathy.
But if you offer a practical solution,
They swat it away. They have a reason why it won't work, because often subconsciously, they don't want a solution. They want the audience. They want the validation. They want confirmation that their struggle is unique and overwhelming. Solving the problem would mean losing the attention and maybe even losing their identity.
it's like that saying, if you run into an asshole in the morning, you ran into an asshole. If you run into assholes all day, you're the asshole. Or in this case, if every bar you go to ends in a fight.
Haha, yeah, exactly. It's probably not the bars. You're the common denominator bringing the chaos. And often, the underlying mechanism here is something called secondary gain.
Secondary gain, what exactly is that?
It's the unintentional, often subconscious benefit a person gets from being in a state of pain or difficulty or trauma. It sounds weird, but the gain can be things like attention, sympathy, maybe a sense of identity, sometimes even a strange kind of safety or comfort in the familiar misery.
How does that work? How can pain bring gain?
Think about when something genuinely bad happens to someone. A serious illness, a major loss, a traumatic event, what often follows. A huge influx, a bombardment, as the source calls it, of attention. Sympathy cards, people bringing food, constant check-ins, support groups.
Right. The brain connects the pain with this sudden surge of care and validation.
Exactly. And for some people, when that intense attention naturally starts to fade because life moves on, people get back to their own lives. They can become almost addicted to that feeling of being cared for, of being the center of concern,
So they need to keep the problem going or find new ones.
or amplify existing ones. They create this self-perpetuating cycle to keep drawing that external sympathy, to maintain that status as the person who needs help, the central character in the drama. It becomes an addiction to the attention their problems generate.
The source material had that really striking example. The friend who experienced genuine racial abuse, but then seemed to find racism everywhere afterwards.
Yeah, that's a tough one. But it illustrates how an identity can get completely wrapped up in the trauma. This person went through something truly awful, genuine racial abuse years before, and rightly received a lot of support. But their core identity became the heroic survivor fighting the constant battle.
So when the original threat was gone,
They needed new enemies to maintain that identity. They started interpreting ambiguous interactions, even within their own family, as stepmother and in-law as racist attacks. They needed to keep finding perpetrators to sustain that vital sense of self as the victimized fighter. The war had become essential to who they were.
wow. Okay, so if you recognize this pattern in someone, this resistance to solutions, this potential secondary gain, what's your responsibility as a friend or colleague or potential helper, especially if trying to fix them is likely futile?
The number one rule, according to this philosophy, is crystal clear. If they didn't explicitly ask you for help, do not offer unsolicited advice. Don't intervene.
Why not? It feels unhelpful, maybe uncaring.
Because, first, they're almost certainly not ready or willing to hear it. If they wanted a solution, they'd likely be asking for specific help, not just venting. Second, and crucially for your well-being, you are wasting your precious cognitive energy. Remember the bathtub. Giving unsolicited advice is like punching a hole in the bottom of your own tub.
And trying to fix them might actually feed the problem.
Often, yes. Your attempts to solve their problem just give them more of the attention and validation they're subconsciously seeking. It reinforces the dynamic. The desire to fix someone often comes more from our ego, look how helpful and smart I am, than from a genuine assessment of whether the person is ready for change.
So the key is boundaries, protecting your own energy.
Meticulous boundaries. You have to be incredibly self-aware about where you invest your time and emotional energy. The expert even had a concrete rule for her own coaching clients, a maximum of 3 mentoring sessions.
Only 3. Why so strict?
It wasn't about being stingy with her time. It was a deliberate strategy to prevent dependency, to stop clients from seeing her as the permanent solution, the hero who would always rescue them. The goal was to give them tools, guideposts, and then firmly push them to realize, wait, I have the ability to solve this myself. You cannot let yourself become someone else's perpetual crutch.
And that rule about no unsolicited advice, it's not just politeness, it's self-preservation.
It's pure cognitive hygiene. It's almost always the wrong advice for their specific, nuanced situation anyway, and it's a massive drain on your mental resources. Advice only lands when someone has actively sought it out, signaling they're actually in a place to consider action, not just seeking sympathy.
There was that really stark example of boundary setting, the mother enabling her son who wouldn't leave his room.
Right. A heartbreaking situation, but a powerful lesson. The mother was complaining bitterly about her adult son refusing to leave his room, but she was simultaneously bringing him food, doing his laundry, essentially facilitating his confinement. She was providing the comfort, the attention, the secondary gain.
So what changed?
She finally drew a hard boundary. Stopped participating in the dynamic. Essentially said, I love you, but I will not enable this anymore. I won't bring you food in here. And the source says, once that secondary gain was removed, he got better very, very quickly. The withdrawal of the enabling behavior forced him to confront the reality and choose action over the unhealthy comfort he'd settled into. Setting boundaries like that can feel incredibly difficult, even cruel, in the moment. But sometimes, they're the only thing that can actually catalyze real change.
All right, we've covered managing ourselves internally and navigating tricky external dynamics. Let's talk about the engine that drives effective action in the world: genuine confidence.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about confidence, especially among the truly high performers the expert worked with, the SEALs, the agents, top executives, is that they don't really talk about confidence much.
They don't sit around analyzing it.
No, they just are. They embody it, constantly evaluating your own confidence, questioning, am I confident enough? That very act plants seeds of doubt. It turns confidence from a state of being into a problem you're trying to solve, which is inherently insecure.
So real confidence, the kind you can't fake. Where does that come from? It's not just positive affirmations, right?
Definitely not. It's not about puffing yourself up. Real deep confidence lives in, as the source puts it, 1,000 micro-expressions. It's in your posture, your tone, your eye contact, how you react under pressure, and it all stems from one central place: the story running in your head, the deep, unwavering internal belief that you are high value.
High value, meaning?
Meaning you have inherent worth, capability, and the right to take up space, make decisions, and pursue your goals, independent of external validation. When you truly believe that, your behavior just naturally changes.
And the source contrasted this with that dating example, right?
Yeah.
The friend whose date said she didn't want kids.
Yeah, that was a great illustration of fear versus confidence. The date mentions not wanting kids, and the friend's immediate reaction is internal panic.
Oh no, but I really want kids. This relationship is doomed. His reaction is totally fear-based.
Why fear-based?
Because his sense of worth, his desire for the relationship to work, was dependent on her approval, on her aligning with his future plans. He was operating from a place of scarcity, terrified of losing the potential relationship. Okay, so what's the confident, high-value response in that situation?
It's calm, self-possessed, maybe even a little detached. Something like, okay, interesting. Well, honestly, I'm still trying to figure out if I want kids with you yet either. You're still kind of on trial here too, you know?
Yeah. Okay, that takes guts.
It's not about being arrogant or dismissive. It's about signaling self-respect. It says, my decisions and my future aren't solely dependent on your approval. I have my own standards, my own value. That kind of internal grounding, that lack of fear-based reaction, is actually incredibly attractive, and more importantly, it protects you from being easily manipulated or diminished.
So how do we build that genuine high-value confidence? The sources give 2 concrete strategies. The first one is about your environment.
Absolutely. Number 1, curate a good circle. You have to be incredibly meticulous, even ruthless, about who you spend your time with. Because insecurity, negativity, low vibration energy, whatever you want to call it, it's contagious. It bleeds onto you.
It's easier to be pulled down than to pull someone else up.
Exponentially easier. People stuck in drama, victimhood, constant complaining, they will drain your energy and subtly undermine your own high-value story. The agent has this stark warning. Be careful who you try to save. Some people will drown you. Protecting your mental and emotional environment is non-negotiable for maintaining confidence.
Okay, protect your circle. What's the second trait?
Number 2, become a decision maker. This is huge. Confidence isn't built by waiting around for perfect information or 100% certainty. That almost never comes.
So you just have to jump.
You have to consistently make decisions, even small ones, even if you're not totally sure, even if you might be wrong sometimes. Confidence comes from trusting your ability to make a call, act on it, and then self-correct if necessary.
The source mentioned Obama again here, didn't it? The 51% rule.
Yeah, for the really big, complex decisions like the bin Laden raid, his threshold was apparently around 51% certainty. If he was just slightly leaning towards one option, he felt comfortable making the call.
That's incredible. Most of us wait for like 95% certainty before making a big life change.
And that waiting is the paralysis. If you're terrified of looking stupid or failing or making the wrong choice, you'll end up doing nothing. Confident people accept that being wrong is possible, maybe even likely sometimes, but they trust their own capacity to handle the consequences, to learn, to adapt. They know that inaction is often the riskiest decision of all.
So just make the call, even if it's just slightly better than the alternative, and trust yourself to figure it out.
Trust yourself to figure it out. That's the core of decision-making confidence.
And related to taking action, there's this counterintuitive idea about starting small, like almost embarrassingly small.
Right. This tackles procrastination. Why do we put things off? Usually it's because the task feels overwhelming. It's like staring up at Mount Everest. The sheer scale induces psychological discomfort, dread. We avoid that feeling.
So the advice isn't just be brave and tackle Everest.
No. Sometimes a bit of ignorance or naivete helps, just starting without fully comprehending the scale. But the practical strategy is often about shamefully small steps, tiny incremental movements that feel almost ridiculous but break the inertia.
Like the examples in the source.
Exactly. The person overcoming severe agoraphobia who started by just moving their vacuum cleaner 10 centimeters closer to the front door each day. Or the client who wanted to run marathons but couldn't get started. They began by just moving their running shoes from the closet to beside the bed. Then the next day, putting them on. Tiny steps.
Exposure therapy, essentially.
It's exposure therapy for the psychological discomfort of starting. You build momentum, and more importantly, you build confidence by making a tiny promise to yourself, I will move the shoes today, and then keeping it. Each kept promise, no matter how small, reinforces the belief that you can take action and follow through. That's how you build up to eventually climbing that mountain.
Okay, final section. We've managed our minds, our presentation, our relationships, built some confidence. Now, how do we communicate effectively? How does the professional self actually operate out in the world? The sources stress that how you say things, your paralanguage, is often more important than the words themselves.
Massively important. Decades of research confirm this. Your voice itself is a tool of influence, a carrier wave for perceived authority and confidence.
So what's the practical advice? Speak louder.
Not necessarily louder, but with more. Ownership. The key is speaking from your diaphragm, using your deeper, more resonant, authentic tone, not a tight, high-pitched throat voice. People instinctively register lower vocal frequencies as more authoritative, more credible. Think about news anchors, leaders you respect. They tend to have a grounded vocal quality.
And avoiding that upward inflection at the end of sentences, the questioning tone.
Absolutely. That upward tilt signals uncertainty, deference, like you're seeking approval for your own statement. You need to own your statements with a clear, grounded, downward inflection. Even in everyday conversations, the agent practices this awareness, knowing that a controlled, resonant tone commands more respect.
So that's the physical aspect. What about the strategic use of, well, silence?
Pausing. This is one of the biggest tells between confident and unconfident speakers.
How so?
Low-confident speakers tend to rush. They talk fast, filling every silence, often using filler words like and Subconsciously, they feel they don't deserve to take up the time, that they need to cram their thoughts in before someone else jumps in. It signals, what I'm saying isn't that important, hurry up.
Whereas confident people, leaders, they're comfortable with pauses.
They command silence. When you pause strategically, you achieve several things. One, you own the space, you own your time, you're making the room wait for you. Two, and this is crucial, you give your listeners time to actually absorb what you just said. Let the point land. Feel its impact.
If you rush through something important, you dilute it.
Completely. You're inadvertently telling the audience it's negotiable or not that significant. Using silence deliberately is a powerful way to underscore key points and project calm authority. It's a physical manifestation of confidence.
Okay, let's talk content. When you do speak, especially in difficult situations, asking for a raise, confronting a boss, negotiating the advice is very clear. Ditch the feelings, use facts.
Strip out the vague, subjective language entirely. Phrases like I think, I feel, I believe, they're weak, they're easily dismissed because they're just your internal state. Nobody can argue with how you feel, but they also don't have to act on it.
So instead of I feel I deserve a raise because I work hard,
You fight with facts, quantifiable data, objective reality. So it's, quote, in the last 6 months, I initiated and completed Project X, which involved Y hours of dedicated work, mentioning overtime if applicable, and resulted in Z dollars of increased revenue or saved costs, or improved efficiency, whatever's measurable for the company. Based on this measurable contribution, I am requesting a review of my compensation to align with the value I have demonstrably delivered.
facts are just harder to argue with.
Much harder. It shifts the conversation from your subjective feelings to your objective contribution. The expert mentioned using specific legal codes or regulations when dealing with bureaucracy. You need to find your equivalent. What are the irrefutable data points that support your case? Use those.
This focus on clarity and facts extends to how information is shared within effective teams, right? Like the emphasis on written memos over presentations.
Yeah, the Amazon model is often cited, requiring written narrative memos like 6-pagers instead of relying on bullet points or someone just freestyling in a meeting.
Why is that better?
Because bullet points are lazy. They're open to interpretation, they hide ambiguity. Writing a full narrative forces you to think clearly, structure your argument logically, support it with data, and anticipate questions. If you can't articulate your idea clearly and concisely in writing, you probably haven't thought it through well enough to waste other people's valuable cognitive time discussing it.
It all comes back to cognitive load, doesn't it? Respecting other people's bathtubs.
Exactly. And respecting your own contribution score.
The contribution score. Explain that.
This is the idea that your perceived value and influence in a group isn't just about what you say, but how often and how concisely. If you're constantly talking, jumping into every discussion, vomiting everything out, as the source puts it,
Even if you have good ideas.
even if you have good ideas, people start to tune you out. Your signal gets lost in the noise. Your contribution score drops. You're seen as less thoughtful, less impactful, maybe even less competent, ironically.
So less is more. Use your pauses, choose your moments.
Precisely. Use silence. Speak with conviction, but use fewer words. Get to the point. Research actually shows people are perceived as more intelligent and trustworthy when they use clear, direct language, not when they try to impress with complex jargon. Make every contribution count. Ensure it's necessary and adds real value. Don't just talk to fill space. Hashtag outro.
Wow. Okay, that was a really intensive deep dive into a very different way of thinking about effectiveness, power, and even confidence.
Right.
Let's quickly recap those core philosophies we've unpacked, the ones that help shift you from feeling passive to being a proactive agent in your own life.
Right. So first, protect your brain power. Relentlessly lighten that cognitive load. Manage your bathtub, take things out, eliminate trivial decisions like Obama did with his suits, so you have the full capacity for the essential tasks.
Second, ditch the needy, authentic self at work. Bring your professional self, the focused, competent, mission-driven version that prioritizes contribution and respect over personal, emotional expression.
Third, reclaim your power by living in truth. Accept people for who they are, the fixed iceberg. Stop trying to change them and focus all your energy on your adaptability, your decisions. Can you adapt, or is it a deal breaker?
Fourth, watch out for the secondary gain trap. Recognize when people, or maybe even yourself, are clinging to problems for the attention they want. Set firm boundaries to protect your energy, and don't offer unsolicited advice.
And finally, build real confidence through action, not analysis. Curate your circle ruthlessly, become a decisive person comfortable with imperfection, and use shamefully small steps to overcome procrastination and build momentum. Confidence is built by doing, not just thinking.
And that final provocative thought from the expert. If you find yourself constantly dealing with drama or volatility,
Pause and ask the tough question. What decision did I make that exposed me to this? Take responsibility for your choices, and remember that trust, even with close family and friends, isn't automatic. It has to be earned and maintained through consistent, reliable, professional behavior.
This has been incredibly insightful. We really build these deep dives for you, the listener, the learner. So if you've seen the show before, if you got value out of this today, please help us help my team here. Hit that subscribe button. That's how we know we're on the right track. And we'll keep building this show for you. That's my promise.